Good evening, family. You wanted a video of cooking, so tonight it is wedding soup. I'm going to flip the camera around and show you a little bit about the preparation that has been done already. Here we go. On the stove, we have one large soup pot. We have Italian-style meatballs, about a pound, 5 eggs, another pound of really good ground beef, some spinach, canned. It calls for frozen, but I'm using canned because that's what I have in the pantry. Some chicken broth, low sodium, some Parmesan cheese, already shredded. I cheated, I didn't want to do it by myself. Some Pepe noodles, and seasoning. We have pepper, salt, garlic herb, homemade Italian, and garlic. We're going to prep the meat in the bowl, make little tiny meatballs, which we'll squeeze through this plastic bag here with a small hole. And then we're going to add a little bit more in vegetables because Dad and I like a lot of them. So I'll be back with you in just a moment. Okay, so we're back after the commercial break. And gotta love it. So what I've done is I went ahead and put the 5 eggs into a bowl. We're going to beat them up to where they're whipped up nice and pretty. We've opened up all of the items that we need, like our shredded cheese and our spinach and our beef broth, or chicken broth, excuse me, and a generous portion of these Pepe noodles. The recipe calls for a half a cup, but I'd never made this before, so we're going to find out if that's actually enough or not. And then I've got my beef prepped with the Italian meatballs in there with all the seasoning, and we're going to mix them all up and get it into a piping bag, which in this case is going to be a sandwich bag because the gallon Ziploc bag has a pleated bottom and it will not work very well. So be back with you here in just a minute. And we're back. And while we were gone, I put the 2 containers of the chicken broth into my pot, my stew pot. I took and went ahead and mixed up the meat that we want to use and put it into my sandwich bag. There's a little tiny hole right there so we can pipe out little tiny pieces. I took and whipped my eggs, added the Parmesan cheese to it so that it will be stirred and incorporated one into another, and added into the broth here shortly. And I opened up my vegetables and drained them because they were kind of soggy because the bag leaked. The rest of the meat is over here, so I split it about in half. So this is about a 1-pound package, and we're going to be adding that to the broth here shortly. I'll be back in just a couple of moments. Okay, so we're back. Now, in the meantime, what I've done is, I'll show you in just a moment. Went ahead and into our broth, added about half of our can of our, and you can't see it very well that way, half of a can of our spinach, only because I don't know how much I want in there. So we're going to check that out later on if we need to add more. And that's going to be starting to warm up, which is what we want it to do. I went ahead and incorporated the Parmesan cheese into the eggs mixture, so it's already ready to go. And I started piping out my little meatballs, and that's about how big they're going to be. That's, if you can tell, that's about the size of your fingernail. I'm going to be making a whole bunch more of those. And while this is warming up, that's what we'll be baking meatballs. I'll be back in just a minute. Okay, so about 10 to 15 minutes have passed, and the soup broth is coming up to temperature, which is what we want because we're going to dump the egg and cheese mixture in it soon. And we've started to make the meatballs. And I can tell you this right now, that's the hardest part of the whole thing. Because even as you're trying to get those out and squeeze them kind of small, it's a very, very difficult task on your hands. Highly recommend to do it in advance, and I think you got to get the family involved. Now over here on the other side, we've put on a pot of water because it's recommended to go ahead and cook the noodles first. My only concern is that the pan or the strainer that I have for the noodles might be too big of holes and the noodles are going to pass right through, but we'll find out here in a little bit if that's true or not. So we're going to continue to cook and see what happens. Back in a bit. Okay, we're back. I wanted to show you this. This looks awesome. We just took the eggs and the cheese and dumped it into the soup mixture we had on the stove cooking already. I've taken and reduced the temperature down on the stove, and already you can start to smell the yumness coming out of the pan. This is totally amazing. We're going to stir it just a little bit just to try to get the cheese to melt. And then we're turning the temperature down really low, put the lid on it, and let it sit there and simmer while we get the noodles done and make more meatballs. So back in a bit. Okay, while you were gone, we got the water started here, and it's boiling, and it's been heavily salted with some coarse sea salt, which is what we're going to do. We're going to let that dissolve a little bit. We're going to get our noodles in here in just a moment. In the meantime, our main soup broth over here is looking really, really good. Let me show you what it looks like here. We got our mise en place done with the vegetables, and it had them all thawed up, and you can see them occasionally. You see some onions and carrots and stuff like that in there. If I had to do it over, I probably would add another bag. And I actually went looking in the freezer, but guess what? There wasn't any. But I also got the little meatballs done. That stuff takes a lot longer than you think it will. But anyhow, that is the roughly 1 pound between the sausage and the burger mix. Oops, water's boiling for our noodles. Be back in a minute. Okay, so we're back. And what we were doing in the meantime while you guys were gone is I took a look at the volume of the soup and the number of noodles that was cooking and decided that it probably ain't enough. So I went ahead and doubled up the noodles as they were cooking. I went ahead and put all the meatballs down in the broth, and they're starting to cook slowly in there. You can, whoops, I got to get that where you can see it. There you go. They're starting to slowly cook. We're going to stir it occasionally because with it having egg in there, egg can separate if it gets too hot. And we don't want that to happen. We don't want to have it look like egg drop soup when it's not supposed to be. And over here is our noodles. We got them boiling really good. And they are not real big, as you can see. But I still think it'll be tasty. So they're cooking and boiling, and we're going to wait until those done. I'm following the directions on the package on how long it takes to cook those. And see what will happen here in a little bit on how big they get. And we're just going to dump them all in there anyways. It doesn't matter. So we're going to put them in there, but I tell you this right now, it smells so delicious. It is just, I'm thinking this is good. Day after COVID vaccine booster shot day, you betcha. Going to be good. Back in a bit. Okay, well, the noodles are done. I'm going to let you see what look. That is about a cup. And if you look, that is a lot. But that's okay. We're going to dump it into our broth anyway. Been checking on the little meatballs in there. They're still cooking slow in there, which is wonderful. I put another pot of water on back here just in case this batch of noodles is not enough. So we're going to dump these guys in here and see what happens. Okay, so it's done. Everything's been incorporated into the big pot. We've been letting things simmer for about 25 minutes or so. I'm going to flip it around to take a look. So here we go. All that yummy deliciousness right there in the pot. I think if I did it over again, I would take and cook the little meatballs in a skillet first, and then add all that lovely fat and stuff from the skillet into this. So I've had to give it some time to get all the meatballs cooked. And I try to make them all about the same size, because as you know, size does matter when you're cooking. It's got to be equal, or else it's not going to cook evenly. So we're getting ready to scoop out. I hope you all have a evening, because we're getting ready to have soup. Talk to you later.